success after the very successful talk that she gave a year ago this month on the birch family. Emily's fascination with trees started when she was young. Her focus on the variety of trees found in Virginia happened while living in the central Blue Ridge Mountains outside of Charlottesville. After graduating from the 2011 Tree Stewards of Arlington and Alexandria class, Emily began to teach Tree ID. Nora initially trusted her with the very next incoming Tree Stewards class, which has flourished into teaching Tree ID by season for the Charlottesville area Tree Stewards, among other things, where she is based today. When she isn't teaching, Emily can often be found outside with her dog, a hand lens, and a field guide. So, Emily, take it away.
Thank you. I'm gonna start screen sharing so that you guys can see my presentation.
We're up to 38 people. That's what we got last year. Terrific.
Okay, and I'm just getting it into. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Excellent. Yep. And I'm going to put this, I'm going to just rearrange my screen a little bit so I have you guys in different places. And great. Okay. So thank you to Paul and Nora. Paul for coming up with this idea to research and present on genuses or genera or family of trees each year. Your first one on maples was an inspiration, and I am delighted that you guys have asked me again, because I find this to be a really great opportunity to learn a little bit more about trees. And Nora, I also want to thank you for allowing me to extend invitations to the groups I'm involved with locally here, the Charlottesville Area Tree Stewards, the Central Blue Ridge Master Naturalists, and the Nature Foundation at Wintergreen. So I appreciate that. And as the information said, we're talking about the Hamamelidacae family tonight, and that's the witch hazel family, and the fact that it eventually fractured. And we're going to talk about that as we go. So as I was putting together this presentation, I decided I needed to give everybody an outline because I wasn't really sure where I was going or what I was doing, and I thought it would be important for everybody else to know what I was doing and where I was going. So we're going to go through the original classification of how the Hamamelidaceae family started. Then we're going to talk about species that are found here in Virginia, the changes to the classification, which is talking about the fracturing that we had on the first slide. And then we're going to talk about miscellaneous species details for those two species that are in Virginia. So it all begins with a classification with Linnaeus. He is considered the father of modern taxonomy, and he was a person that originally developed the hierarchical classification that we use for nomenclature. And he started this back in the 1700s. He was Swedish, and he was a naturalist, a physician, as well as a botanist. And people sent him plants from all over the world. And he worked on classifying plants and animals, but we're going to focus on plants tonight, into logical categories and show their relationship to one another. And if everybody has done any basic botany or biology class, you will probably remember the acronym or the sentence, King Philip came over for green spaghetti. That is how you remember. It is kingdom, phylum, which we now use the word division for, class, order, family, genus, and species. So it's important to remember that this is a classification system that we have put against nature. So not everything falls into this thing fantastically, but until the early 2000s, this is what we used, and we did really well with it. And traditionally, everything was based on structural similarities, particularly with the reproductive parts of flowers. And because of that, we're going to have to talk about flowers. And I know there's probably some people cringing, but we're going to be focusing on angiosperms tonight because that's where our family is on that side of the tree. And angiosperms have cased or encased seeds or covered seeds as some people refer to them. And when we think of the flower, we want to think of whorls or circles of modified leaves. So at the top of the stem, the first whorl of modified leaves are going to be the sepals. The second whorl of modified leaves are the petals. The third whorl is going to be our male reproductive pieces. That's going to be the filament with the anther on top, and the anther will have pollen inside. And then that last whorl, usually right in the very center, is going to be the female part of the flower. And that is going to have the stigma on top, which is sticky and receptive for pollen. It has the style down the middle, and then it has the ovary at the bottom with ovules in it. And all women have style, which is why you'll remember this is the female part. And just in case, stigma plus style plus ovary equals pistil. It's another name for all three parts together. And anther plus filament equals stamen, and that is all male pieces. So we have this flower. It has 4 separate whorls for the different pieces, but in some plants, we have a perfect flower with all 4 whorls, and that will have both the sepals, petals, stamen, and pistil. And we can have incomplete flowers or imperfect flowers. An incomplete flower is missing one of those whorls, and we actually don't worry about incomplete. We really more often focus on whether they are imperfect, and that means they're missing either the male or the female sexual pieces for reproduction. So here on our side, we have a perfect flower, and this is complete. But if we were missing a sepal whorl or a pistil whorl, then it would be considered an incomplete or an imperfect flower. It would be considered perfect but incomplete. And then if it was with one part of male or female, it would be considered imperfect. And we'll touch on this again as we go. So hopefully I haven't confused you completely. And as I said in the previous slide, it's King Film came over for green spaghetti class. Used to be the class and order levels was based on the number and length of stamen, and the order was usually on the number of pistils, the female reproductive pieces. So that's how Linnaeus originally did those classification pieces. The other thing that we have to worry and think about is structural similarities. When Linnaeus was putting things together, he would be trying to look at things that came from a similar background. So on our top line here, if it's homologous, they came from a similar background. So all of these pieces, the bat, the mouse forearm, the human arm, they're all mammals, and they all use those things for similar means and method. We don't fly very much, but that's kind of what the bat wing is for motion. Things that are analogous are parts that have arisen that help and do the same function, but they may not have come from the same historical ancestor. So a bat wing versus a butterfly wing versus a bird wing, they all come from different places. Obviously, the bat wing comes from a mammal, which is a hand. An insect wing comes from insects, and bird wings are coming from the avian pieces. So they come from different locations, but they have the similar function, whereas homologous, they came from the same origin and they have different functionalities. So if I said a dolphin flipper, that would be homologous with a human arm. But if I said ladybug, it would be analogous to the bat wing or the butterfly wing. Just wanted to keep that in mind because sometimes we get those similarities confused, which is why some of the mistakes of classification originally happened. So previous classification, I thought I would put our King Philip came over for green spaghetti on the side here with what it's currently listed as. So we start with domain, which is a eukaryote. So it means we have a true cell. The kingdom is the plantae. The subkingdom is the tribionate. And this is something that is going to produce a seed. Spermatophyta is going to produce, so these both mean seed producing. Magnoliophyta for division is division between gymnosperms versus angiosperms. Class is eudicot, so that's where we would split out for monocot versus dicots. And tonight we're talking all dicots. Because these are, they have a trunk which monocots cannot get to most of the time. Subclass is rosids, order is Saxifrages, family is Hamamelidaceae, genus is Liquidambar, and species is Striacophila. I'm not going to get that right, but I'll try each time. So botanical names are really important, and it's not just the genus or the specific epithet. It has to be both pieces together. So when I get lazy and I say it's a quercus, I am not being giving deference to the botanical name that it was given. So here I put Hamamelis virginiana on the screen. This is going to be the witch hazel, and Hamamelis is the noun, which is the genus, and it sometimes reflects the organism's relationship with other organisms. In this case, the meaning of the word comes from two Greek words that means together with fruit, and that is because simultaneously this plant will have flowers and fruit maturing at the same time on a tree. And then the specific epithet in this place is an adjective, in this instance is an adjective or possessive noun. Usually the specific epithet describes a geographic location, a habitat, a part of a plant, or it can be named to honor a person. In this case, it is geographic range, Virginiana. And remember when Linnaeus named this plant, Virginia was a much larger state than it is today. So this was found broadly around this area. So make sure when you are using botanical names that you are trying to use the whole thing instead of just a piece of it, because that could get you in trouble. And the last thing I should say while I'm on this page is we use common names and we use botanical names. Why is it better to use botanical names? And you guys can either unmute yourself to say something or you can put it in the chat. Or I can say it for you. Ooh, looks like people are starting to write. Yay.
There was only
accuracy. Yes, good.
Name.
So when I think William tried to say something too. Oh, sorry, that's Sir William. So common names vary by region. That's great. Less ambiguity with accuracy. These are all fantastic reasons why. I happen to know people in lots of different places, and sometimes they'll reach out and they'll ask me about a plant and they will use the common name, and that can be confusing for me because I don't know if they're talking about the one where I am located or the one where they're located. So it's really important when we use botanical names. And in case anybody was interested, there is an international botanical nomenclature commission, I think it is, and they meet every 6 years to make sure that all plants and animals each have one botanical name. And the botanical name that takes precedence is the earliest one that was given to the plant. Hamamelius virginiana here, you can see this L afterwards. The L stands for Linnaeus. He is the first person that named this plant, and no one has changed it or made it different since then. And you'll notice that I have this italicized Hamamelidacae and with a capital H, and then Virginiana with a lower V and also italicized. That is considered the way it's supposed to be done. And if you are handwriting it, then you usually underline. So just to keep you guys honest. And I even had a class where if I didn't have the author, which in this case is Linnaeus, they deducted points, which I thought was really sneaky. But I guess that helps me make sure I do things correctly. So before the split, Hamamelidaceae, there were about 30 genera in this family, and there are 120 species. There were 3 major genera, none of which were found in the United States. The North American genera that we should be somewhat familiar with is the Fothergillea, the Hamamelidae, and the liquid ambar. The distribution for this species or this family is in subtropical areas, and it can be discontinuous. Awkwardly, liquid ambar is actually found in the mountains of Central America in disjunct populations, which I didn't know until I started planning for this. There's also areas of Asia, we said North America, Australia, Southern Africa, and Madagascar. There is some economic importance for timber, resins, liniments, and ornamentals. Obviously, most of these are shrubs and trees. The leaves are simple, alternate, usually lobed or toothed, and the leafy mesophyll usually contains sclerids, and those are really hard, dense cells. I usually think of like the pit of a peach is made of sclerid cells. Flowers are small and inconspicuous in clusters. They're either perfect or imperfect. We'll get into that. They will either, and they might have a reduced or absent perianth. So that means they would be an incomplete flower. They have a woody capsule, and we'll look at those later. And the leaf coloration in the fall is yellow for the witch hazel and bright red to purple for sweet gum. And there's wildlife value. The ruffed grouse and squirrels eat the seeds and the fruits of the witch hazel. White deer browse its flowers, and there's several species of songbirds and squirrels that eat the sweet gum seeds. So that's the big overall arching picture, and now we'll go into the different species. This is the one that we don't have near here. This is native to woodlands and swamps of southeastern the US. And this is the Fothergillea. This is Latifolia and Gardena. These are both found in North Carolina, but they do not get all the way up to where we are. But we will find, you can find these, I believe, in nurseries for sale. So if you want to put something like this in your garden because you think that flower is interesting, there are definitely opportunities. And this is called witch alder as its common name. For the species we have here in Virginia, there are 2. And Hamamelis virginiana is our witch hazel. Right here on this slide, we have a picture of the bud. It's a terminal bud that's about a 1/2 to 3/4 inch long. It's usually velvety, naked, and it's stalked. It's often flattened, and they wrote that it looks like the foot of a deer, which might be a little bit, it might work for you. I'll let you guys decide. And the lateral buds are similar but smaller. The flowers, this time of year, this picture was taken today, just in case you were wondering. This calyx that we see here, this is the remains of the flower from last fall, so in October, November time. And the calyx these are fused sepals that are here together, and it's divided into 4 parts. They are spreading and they are curved back, and you can see there's pubescence on the outer surface of this calyx and these fused sepals. So Hamamelidacae is kind of fuzzy, is really what the outcome is, especially this time of year. Here are the leaves. This is a brand new leaf, so I might have cheated a little bit. The leaves are alternate, simple, obovate to elliptical with uneven or oblique bases. And I didn't realize that until I was looking at this one. They're 3 to 6 inches long, 2 to 3.5 inches wide, with coarsely waved margins. The upper surface is dark green with smooth, glabrous underside. And there can be some short hairs along the veins on the underside of the leaf. And obviously, I mentioned earlier, the fall color is yellow, and we'll see that later on. Here's the witch hazel in flower. These flowers are perfect. So we have sepals, petals, male and female parts. It has a spicy fragrance. They appear in late autumn when leaves are falling off the tree and the fruits from last year are maturing. Sepals are four-parted and persistent. We saw the persistence of those on that last slide. The petals are 4, yellow, they're strap-like, and they're 1.5 to 2 centimeters long and about 1 millimeter wide. The stamens, there's 4, and they're on short filaments and they're alternating, and they talk about 4 staminodia in there. And staminodia are actually stamens that actually are not fully developed. So they would look like 4 little pieces jutting out, but there wouldn't be anything functioning on top of them. So there'd be no anther or pollen created from those staminodia. And the ovary is 2 carpels. And the fruit is woody, obovoid, and it's 2-beaked. They're capsules that are 1 to 1.5 inches long. They're densely pubescent, and they take about a year to reach maturity, and they may remain on the tree for years. The seeds themselves are very hard and shiny, and they fly out. And this is where we find, pardon me?
Does that mean that they can travel a distance from after they leave the tree, or do they pretty much drop straight down?
Paul, that is a great question, and I'll get to that in the miscellaneous details about this species later on. Okay. But thank you. That's a good precursor and teaser for later. So the range for this is Eastern United States and the extreme southeast of Canada. Habitat usually is found in well-drained floodplains, steep slopes or stream banks, and a variety of habitats. I find when I am walking in the forest that witch hazel is usually just sort of lingering above me as though it's like my shadow that I didn't know I needed. And it often tells me that there is water draining through an area, even if I don't see water on the surface. Especially on slopes where I'm walking in the woods. The growth form, it's large, multi-trunked shrub that's 10 to 15 feet tall. It can reach 30 feet as well. It's usually can be a small tree with broad rounded crown or a top that fans out like an umbrella, depending on which, where you find it, depends on what its habit looks like. And there's 2 other Hamamelidacae that are found in the United States. One is Hamamelidacae vernalis, which is the Ozark witch hazel. It has a broad spreading shape. The flowers are about 1/2 inch long, yellow, orange to red purple. It has a musky sweet aroma, and it blooms from December through March, and it often retains dead leaves, and that people look at as a negative for that tree. And then that's native to Mississippi and Oklahoma. And then Hamamelidacae ovalis, which is big leaf witch hazel or running witch hazel. This is a small to short tree. And it can also be in a dense, thick mat that's 18 inches high. It's got these really strange, weird habits. and it was first discovered in 2005. So this species has not been around long, and it is for it was first described in 2005, and it was found on Camp Shelby in Mississippi. So don't stop exploring, because there's a chance you might find a new plant yourself when you're out in the woods. They've since found it in Florida, Mississippi, which is where it was originally found, Alabama, and Texas, but they haven't found it in Louisiana, which is the one blank spot on that arc of where they have been finding it. The sweet gum is our other species in this family, liquidambar, striaciflora. Yeah, I'm getting closer. Liquus means liquid, amber means amber, and then straciflora means flowing with gum. And that is why it has this name, because sweet gum has this resin that will ooze out from a wound and is often broken off, and people use it as chewing gum. The bark of this tree is rough gray with long, narrow, rounded ridges, and the twig is moderately stout, often singly angled, usually greenish or reddish brown, and smooth. But at the second year of growth, there's usually this parallel corky ridges that are on the branches. And I don't see that on all the branches, just on some of them. And that those ridges or wings create more surface area, and that can increase the weight of snow that accumulates on this tree, which makes this tree not great for heavy snow environments, which is why it doesn't go too far further north than where we are, I don't think. The twig is moderately stout, often slightly angled, usually green to yellow to reddish brown. It's smooth and it's lustrous, and it's aromatic. The bud is large, conical, and shiny, and it's usually sticky. And I usually can identify this by the glistening of the sun off the buds, which might sound just a little trite, but it's true. Those shiny bud scales are very obvious. When we go through bud break, we have leaves and flowers all coming out at the same time from our bud. The flowers are monoecious on this tree, which means that we have male flowers, which are staminate flowers. So they're imperfect. And those are going to be the flowers that are standing up. They're on racemes that are 5 to 10 centimeters long, and each head consists of about 1 to 1.5 centimeters of flowers that have no petals. So really all it is a bunch of filaments with anthers on the end, ready to shake pollen all over the place in the air. The female pistillate flowers are these that are hanging below. They're in solitary heads, and they're drooping on a long peduncle. And they can be 3 to 4 centimeters in diameter at maturity. Each style on this fruit is in 2 parts, so it looks like this at the top, and that ends up being 2 beaked for the ovary underneath. Here's the fruit. It's hard, spiny, and woody. It's also considered a multiple. It's this 2-beaked capsule that's actually it's hundreds of 2-beaked capsules that are fused together, and it often remains on a tree through winter. The seeds within it are 2 to 3 winged, and they are usually wind dispensed. So the pollination for this tree is by wind, and so is dispersal of seeds. These are the leaves. They are alternate, simple. They look, sometimes people suggest maple-like. Star-shaped, I think, works better for me. They have 5 to 7 lobes, and they can be 4 to 8 inches long, and they can be wide. They often have serrated margins. and they can be dark, glossy, and some people have mentioned that they have a camphor odor when they're crushed. In the fall, as I said earlier, their color can be bright red to purple in the sweet gum. So here's some fall colors as well. And the range for this, as I said, we're almost at the top of its range in Northern Virginia. It can sneak a little bit up the coast a little further where the waters keep it a little bit warmer. It likes to be in deep bottomland soils. So it's funny, I usually don't start seeing them in the landscape until somewhere between Charlottesville and Richmond, they start increasing in the landscape. And I've heard that past Richmond, there's forests of sweet gum trees, which I can't imagine what it's like to walk in that, because I remember catching my bus in Arlington, and my street was covered with sweet gums all along as a street tree. And I used to like to skate all the way down to the bus stop on the sweet gum balls because I was always running late and I needed the extra skates to get down to my bus on time. And is there anything else here? Large tree, tall, full crown, bark is thick, furrowed, and twigs can have those corky wings. Okay, we'd already talked about that. So the classification change, this is the third part of this talk that I should mention. So earlier we talked about angiosperm classification with Linnaeus. He started everything, as I mentioned, but then as it's funny, as we all grew apart, which I'm not sure we really did, but we decided to, I guess, focus a little bit more. Each group of botanists in different countries started using different classification systems. So if you were in Europe, you were using the Engler system. If you were in Russia, you were using the Takajan system. Britain was using the Bentham and Hooker system. And here in the United States, we were using the Cronquist system, which was great for if the country you were in, but when you went to the International Botanical Nomenclature Convention, that's where everything sort of got messed up, and you'd have to unpick some of these things and recognize that something that had been described in Britain was also in Europe, and they were the same species, so they'd have to reorganize things, and they'd also have to give the first person that described it the credit for it and let their naming convention be the one that stood. Fast forward to the early 2000s, or I guess late 1990s, they decided that they were going to use genetics to start figuring out the evolutionary relationship of things. So in the Linnaean system, we use morphology and we talked about the flower parts. And now they decided, and some biochemistry, but then they decided to use this phylogenetics. And phylogenetics is the study of the evolutionary history and relationships among or within groups of organisms. So we'll get a little further into that. So we're using genetics, and this started in 1993, and they started by using morphological traits, so things that we could see, in combination with photosynthesis, the photosynthetic gene. So they would look at the photosynthetic gene and the DNA from that, and they would use morphological traits, and they'd pull those together. They'd run their samples, and then they would redistribute the classification of all species. They have done this now 4 times. So we're in the angiosperm phylogeny group classification 4, which was done in 2016. They have some basic principles that they want to maintain the Linnaean system of orders and families, but they want all groups to remain and be monophyletic. And that means that each group has to consist of all descendants of a common ancestor. So that means we can't have anything that may not be quite like, we have to have all descendants. We can't have all descendants plus one more just because we don't know where else to put it. And if anybody knows the Ericaceous family, I refer to that as my kitchen drawer family, because everything in the kitchen sink is in there. And at some point, someone's going to have to go through and start organizing that family, and get things sorted out there. So it's going to take some time. But I want to say that in 2016, when they did this classification, they started using larger banks of genes, including those from the plastids, the plastid DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and nuclear ribosomal genes. So they're moving away from including morphological traits and more genetic pieces, so that we're not getting this mishmash of what we see with what everything is telling us in the genetics. Because what we see, remember when we talked about those analogous or the homologous features, where my hand and a bat wing are the same. But if I was putting my bat wing with an insect wing, just because they both were allowing something to fly, I might be messing up morphological traits that have that don't have similar origins. So we're probably going in the right direction. I still fear the day that someone's going to give me a little clasp that I have to put on leaf to identify my plant, because I'd really still like to use morphological pieces myself. So monophyletic versus polyphyletic versus paraphyletic. So first, let me explain these diagrams. These are simple cladograms, and these line drawings are trying to suggest relationships among organisms. So if we look at A is related to everything below it. And here with B, this is going to be the most recent common ancestor and all its descendants, which makes this monophyletic. And that's what the goal is in the APGs. They want to get them to all being monophyletic. In an instance like this, these are not monophyletic, because you'd have to go all the way back to B to get them to be monophyletic, because these are not related. They might have some. This does not include all of its common ancestors, which is a problem. And then paraphyletic is where we have we include its most recent common ancestor, but not all of its descendants. So in order for us to so having A, I, J, and K makes this paraphyletic, because we're missing all of these descendants that should be included. And I hope that makes sense. So this isn't right because they're not close enough related. We want to go these would be a better grouping here. And just this is what the goal is. And this is not where we want to be, because we are skipping or excluding some things that are related. And I hope that makes some sense. I didn't want to get all the way down into the weeds, but I needed to at least touch them. So here is the phylogeny breakdown for that 2016 APG. This is a poster that was created, and you can see the eudicots back here, which is where we were starting to slide things along. Then we were going to go through here and get to the further to the eudicots. There's a bit of an echo. I think someone's unmuted just to, and then following that, we have to go into here, which is where we have the superrosids, and I think I have, and from here, we're going to go up and we're going to find our saxifrages, saxifragiales, and in it, we're going to have the Hamamelidacae family and the Altegiaceae family. And this is where the liquid ambars ended up. So this is Saxifragales. This is the group that we were looking at the larger level. This would be the order level. Within the woody plants, the genus Liquidambar was included with the Hamamelidaceae family until molecular phylogenetics studies showed that the inclusion might make Hamamelidaceae paraphyletic. And remember, paraphyletic is not what we wanted. We want monophyletic. So they segregated it out into the Altegaceae family in 2008. So this is when the split happened, and this is the paper that documented the whole thing. Whoops. So in this paper, they talk about the rapid speciation of the Saxifragales family, or sorry, Saxifragales order. And because of how rapid the radiation of that happened, it was really hard, and it is really hard for them to figure out who's related to who, because all of a sudden this rapid evolution and bunch of different plant types all came from this one group. Because of how fast that happened and how quickly it happened, they were unable to really figure out how and who was related to what. So to resolve this, they constructed new data sets that include 16 genes. Some were nuclear, some were from plastids, some were mitochondrial. And then they also inverted some plastids, and they put some extra evidence in there, and they used 17 to 28 and 28 taxa to try and shake the whole thing out and get it all to fall in the right order. And I hope that I didn't oversimplify that, and I hope I didn't throw everybody off on a tangent. But the result, by having the liquid ambar in the Hamamelidaceae family, it made it paraphyletic, which is this one here. So there was something that happened when we added that family or that species that caused there to be a bunch of things that could be related that were not captured. So that's why they decided to remove the liquid ambar group into their own family, and that made the Hamamelidaceae family monophyletic, which was the goal. And now they have probably this over here would be considered what the Altegaceae family is. So here's the Altegaceae family. We made it. These are wind pollinated trees. They have hardwood and fruit with numerous seeds. And this consists of a single species with 15 known species, or single genus, sorry, liquid ambar with 15 known species. This was previously divided into the Antidia family and the semi-liquid ambar, but they found that those are hybrids, and they can cross-pollinate and cross-fertilize and create hybrids. So there's not enough distinction between them to consider them separate individual species. So now everything's been lumped in together. So the Altegaceae family only has one genus, which is liquid ambar, and there's 15 different species within that. And everything else is being reclassified or is considered a hybrid and is not part of it. These naturally occur in Central America and Mexico. I talked about them having those pockets on the top of the mountains. North America, where we are, there's also some in the Eastern Mediterranean, China, and tropical Asia. This family has a really extensive fossil record dating back to the Paleogene and the Neogene periods, which are 66 to 2.6 million years ago. And for those of you who are diehards in the epochs and eras and all those things, that's within the Cenozoic era and the Phanerozoic eon. And I think I got that all covered. I took a paleobotany class, and let me tell you, that was crazy, but very cool. And the ancestors of liquid ambar is known from tertiary age fossils that are found in Alaska, Greenland, and mid-continental plateau of North America, much further north than where we see liquid ambar growing today. Okay, we're almost out of this craziness. So when you go in to look at classification today, they start with kingdom, oops, and then they just put clade for however many times they need to divide it. And I think that's, so it's now King Charles ordered fake green spaghetti. I don't know, we'll have to rework on this, but I don't know if I love the fact that they've just sort of erased all those names for the original classification. They just use the same word each time. And that might be what they need to do until there is a maintenance of the orders, so that once they've divided it all out and they've got everything sorted, and I don't know when that will be, they haven't done anything since 2016. Maybe they'll go back and they will give category names to these levels of clades depending on how many they need. And I haven't done any research on that, and I haven't looked into it. But you can see that, like the principal said, for phylogenetics, they have maintained the order and the family from the original Linnaean classification system. And then we have our genus and specific epithet on the bottom. The Hamamelidaceae family now is shrubs and small trees. They have stipules borne on stems and leaves that are often two-ranked. Flowers are complete in 4 whorls. We've talked about the whorls with pistils, stamens, petals, and sepals. The petals generally are narrow and ribbon-like or circular. And there's 3 types of anthers. And this is going to take a little bit more than my quick shorthand, but the anthers either open like a window or they open like a valve, revealing 2 pollen sacs, or one valve opens and swings over and dumps the pollen, or opens and towards the center of the flower, and then dumps 1 pollen sac out. I'm not sure about that third one. More research will have to be done. The pollen is sticky, and the pollination is predominantly considered by insects or wind. And as I said previously, the north distribution is North America and Western Eastern Asia. The last thing that we'll say about these pieces, I know that there are lots of people that are fans of the idea of a mother tree, or trees communicating with one another. And I think the coined term for that now is wood wide web. And when we are looking at the wood wide web, we are looking at mycorrhizal relationships within the roots of different plants. And for these 2 families, I thought it was important to check and see what type of mycorrhizal relationship there is. And this is an endomycorrhizal relationship where the fungi, this mycorrhizal fungus, actually inserts itself into the roots in order to try to help facilitate the movement of nutrients. There has been lots of studies that show that there is movement of nutrients and water and sugars from trees, and fats and sugars from trees into the endomycorrhizal and moving away from trees. What we have not seen yet in any of these studies is the uptake of these things by another tree. So the studies for that connection are still ongoing, but there's lots of people doing research about that. And the possibilities of nutrients moving is either considered by diffusion or through some sort of regulated process. And as I said, this is still new stuff, and people are learning about this and studying this right now. So we'll find more, and I'll be able to expand on this in the future. Now for the miscellaneous species details. So this should be a lot more enjoyable and easy and shouldn't be brain taxing. At least I hope not. So we're going to go back and start with the liquid ambar, our sweet gums. And here are the musings I found. The tree splashes the sky with their fingers, a restless green rout of stars. Which was John Gould Fletcher. And then Alice Vital says, the sweet gum, handsome, vigorous, and beautiful in all seasons, is like a blessing to the landscape. In summer, it's abundantly clad with starlight green leaves, which in autumn become a pageant of muted jewel tones, pale yellow, soft red, deep wine, and bronze. In winter, the symmetrical arranged bare branches, thickly hung with long stemmed seed balls, trace a distinctive silhouette against the sky. Though reliably insect and pest free, the only minor fault with this admirable species is the way it litters the ground with prickly brown seed cases. And I think we all know about those seed cases. I also read that this is kind of resistant to deer. They don't particularly like this plant, and they leave it alone in preference for other tasty treats in your yard. So they won't go after a sweet gum. And the folklore, as I said earlier, a viscous sap oozes from the bark when the tree is wounded, and that was often gathered and chewed by country children. I'm sure that there's other people did that too. An Irish doctor in the 19th century, John Brickell, the sweet and fragrant gum of this tree cures the teeters, herpes, inflammations, and morpho, and other continuous disorders. So not sure what those all are, and they probably have different names today. And the gum or resin was traditionally chewed for sore throats, coughs, colds, diarrhea, dysentery, ringworm, and used externally for sores, skin ailments, wounds, and piles. And there's an ingredient in the compound that is close to benzoate. And I always like to look at those musings from the past and see what is actually thought about those species today. So in 2014, this was published in a pharmaceutical review. Recent reports of the benefits, effective antimicrobial agent, antioxidant, anticoagulant, and a cancer chemopreventative agent. And it seems that there is something going on with the sweet gum compounds that is potentially beneficial to us. So, and I like that it's environmentally friendly pesticide as well. So if you don't want to use pesticides, this might work instead. And I wonder if you could just use the leaf litter and spread it around. That would probably take some more research to actually know. There's a fruitless sweet gum out there, and I thought this was completely amazing, because why would we want a fruitless tree? And how on earth does a fruitless tree survive? So the story behind this is that this tree was, there was a tree that was found in Pinehurst, North Carolina by Rassie E. Wicker, and a piece of that was planted on the campus of William and Mary College in Virginia. And J.C. Ralston found that, and he decided to take cuttings from this and create more fruitless sweet gums. So he found this tree, and he had a knack for quickly turning over things in the horticultural trade to be able to get them out and into gardens and in nurseries as fast as possible. So he discovered this. He quickly turned the plant into hundreds or thousands of starts that were distributed to nurserymen and gardens throughout the world. And this happened in around the 1980s when it got into the nursery trade. It hasn't performed as well as he wanted in the American landscapes. First, it's not as winter hardy as some of the northern strains, and not being cold hardy to only negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So it makes it winter hardy throughout Arkansas, but it can be killed off if it's any further than St. Louis. And the second problem is that it has not been growing as a symmetrical tree. So instead of having a cookie cutter shape like the native or like a Bradford pear, this one sort of has a more free form habit, and people don't like that. It doesn't give the balance that they want when they put this in plant boxes or plant street trees and things like that. The lateral branches will often need to be pruned just a few years after it's been put in, because otherwise it won't create a great strong branching system. And I looked through different books. It says Durr thought that it was weak wooded, and he also said he witnessed some significant damage from ice storms. And he said he also found some trees set fruit, even though it's described as fruitless. So keep that in mind if you happen to be thinking of planting this. And the last thing is there are two other cultivars, the Happy Days and the Slender Silhouette, that are seedless as well. Here are the basic pieces about it. So it can be 60 to 75 feet tall, 20 to 40 feet wide. It's pyramidal or oval in shape. It likes sun to partial shade. It likes acidic, well-drained soils, has a showy foliage, and it still has the cork projection along the twigs. It's a great street tree. And it says right after that it's a great street tree that it can be aggressive near sidewalks and driveways and break them up. So I'm not sure how it can be a good street tree without breaking up sidewalks, but someone will figure that out. I just noticed that there was a little bit of that didn't quite jive. So that's where I found it, and I wanted to pass it along. I'm going to switch over to the witch hazel now. And the musings for that is it's from an old Anglo-Saxon word called Wicca, which means weak or flexible. And it also comes from the Old English word wick, which means to bend. And this was actually often used because the witch hazel branches were often used for dowsing. And that's the practice where you're looking for water with a forked branch, or that you call a divining rod. And they would use it all the time, which is why it was used for dowsing. And then because the leaves resembled those of the hazelnut tree, that's why it became witch hazel. So there you go. Not sure how that happened, but I always think it's interesting to find these things. Henry Thoreau thought there's something witch-like in the appearance of the witch hazel that blooms in October and November with its irregular and angular spray and petals like furries, hair, and small ribbon streamers. Its blooming, too, is this irregular period when other shrubs have lost their leaves as well as blooms. Looks like witchcraft. Witch hazel blossoms in the fall to cure the chills and fevers of all. And that was Ernest Thompson Sutton. And then I also found that French Canadians and the Iroquois made a tea, Café du Diablo, which means devil's coffee or devil's tea. So I don't think they liked it very much. The tea was for colds and sore throats. And Native Americans use the twigs and the leaves as a liniment on bruises, inflammation, and aching backs. It was also rubbed on athletes' legs to keep their legs and muscles limber. And as I said, I like to compare that and contrast that with the uses and healths of witch hazel today. So Healthline in 2023 relieves inflammation, reduces skin irritation, helps treat hemorrhoids, fights acne, alleviates scalp sensitivity, soothes sore throat, protects against skin damage, and wards off, oh, I left a D out there, wards off infection. So plenty of things that are going on there. And then I found a poem about the witch hazel written by Elizabeth Akers, and she wrote this. She was a clerk and nurse during the Civil War, and she wrote this, and it was published in the Century in 1894. And I thought it was interesting because she talks about this wondrous brush be plumbed from root to tips with crimpled and curling bloom of shredded gold. So she obviously liked this plant, which is kind of cool. And this will be posted afterwards so you can read the whole poem. We didn't have time for all of it today. Witch hazel, there's over 200 or more cultivars, and you would think, actually my husband asked, why are there the need for that many cultivars? These are created for flowers, flower color, the number of color of flowers, fragrance, blooming, planting, form and shape, autumn color, leaf retention, and maybe for disease resistance. If you want to learn more about the cultivars, there's a gentleman, Tim Bronsman. He actually mentions green, oh gosh, you guys mentioned it, Green Pond, the place that has the collection of witch hazels in Northern Virginia, where we used to have our master naturalist meetings.
Green Springs.
Green Springs. I knew there was green in it. Thank you. And he mentions that in his talk. There's a witch, it's an hour long, and it's all about the different witch hazels that are around natively and those that are in the cultivars. And then a book was written by Chris Lane on witch hazels in 2005, and it's currently out of printing, so we couldn't get that. Then we have Hamamelis X intermedia. This is a hybrid of Hamamelis japonica and Hamamelis mollis, which originates in China. And to use this name, there has to be some amount of both species, the one originating from Japan and one from China. For example, it could be 50-50 split, 25-75, even 15-85. But it has to be exclusive of those two bloodlines. If it involves any other species, you can't use Hamamelis X intermedia, because this is a specific defined hybrid that has been published. No others have. And one other thing I learned while I was researching this is when you are getting a cultivar of Hamamelis, or either these two or a cultivar of them, we don't create Hamamelis or witch hazel from cuttings in the nursery trade. They actually found that they die after the first year or in their second season if they make it through the first season. But instead they graft a scion cutting of the witch hazel to a piece of root, and they do it directly to a piece of root to avoid it getting any suckers. It's more labor intensive, but more reliable for commercial production. So when you go and buy a witch hazel or witch hazel variety or cultivar, you are buying something that has been produced via a graft. And I thought that was interesting to learn today. Another thing that I had to investigate, because we're playing with witch hazels, is these witches' hats that we see all over the leaves. And the first thing I should say is, let me tell you, no one is very clear about the outcome of this. But I did find that there are two different leaf galls, and they are created by an aphid. One is the Hamorpheus cornea, and the other is the Hamorpheus Hamamelidaceae. I'll do this one first because it has a 3-generation thing that's going on. The stem mothers crawl into the leaf buds. As the leaf grows, she injects or stings the leaf multiple times, which causes the leaf to grow around her. This stem mother then reproduces asexually, creating 50 to 70 female offspring. They let loose. There's a 2nd generation that develops another 50 to 70 female offspring. And they disperse again across the plant. And then the 3rd generation produces female and males, which reproduce sexually, and they lay eggs on the bark for the next season. And these are often found just at higher elevations. The Hamorpheus cornue, they talk about 7 generations per year, which pretty much blew my mind. So the idea is that we have eggs that are laid on both witch hazel and birch species. They often refer to just river birch, but I'm guessing that several different birches could suffice in this instance. So the young aphid does the same thing as she did, or as an aphid did on the other one, reproducing asexually twice, and the 3rd generation reproduces sexually. Then they fly over to the birch tree where they do the same thing for a couple generations, and then the last generation flies back to the witch hazel to lay its eggs. I don't know. It was mind-blowing. And this happens more at lower elevations rather than higher elevations.
Does
So
this kill the tree?
it does not kill a tree. So the cool thing is that while this shelter and protection around the aphid, the tree is still growing, offering and creating food for all these nymphs or aphid babies. I don't know what they're really called. But the actual outside of the home, or this gall, is still green, so it can still do photosynthesis. So this does not kill or impact the tree negatively, which I thought was really crazy. Yes, someone is feels the same way I do. And while you're looking closely at witch hazel leaves, there is a leaf roller moth that also likes to inhabit these guys. And this guy will each caterpillar makes a home for itself, and it rolls the leaf as many times as it can, and then it'll staple it down with little tufts of silk, and it's only about a centimeter long, this moth that comes out. It's rarely seen, but I have to tell you, I have opened up these rolled up leaves and found all the frass from the caterpillar in there. And now I know it's the leaf roller moth that's doing it. And I, again, couldn't believe it. Okay, let's stop talking about leaves. Let's go back to those flowers. So why do these flowers happen so late? And what is the cost of that to the plant? So, okay. Oh gosh, they're all coming in singly. That's kind of funny. Okay, I think that's 2. So we flower late because we're avoiding competition with other flowering plants, and it avoids us having a hybrid created. Because Vernalis and Virginiana do have areas where they are both in the same, can be in the same location, but if they have different flowering periods, it can prevent hybridizing. Oh gosh, okay, let's go back. So, but what is the cost to that? If you flower at the very end of the season, you don't have enough time to produce fruit after pollination. So fertilization is delayed until the following May. So we flower in October, November, but we don't actually have fertilization until May. And fruit set is really low. analysis over 40,000 flowers, only 1% produce viable seeds. That's crazy low. But this plant has been super successful because we see it growing all over, and we don't know why. So next we go to the pollination puzzle, because so we have these things that are flowering very late in the season, but we have no idea what's pollinating them yet. But we do know that the sticky pollen and nectar are at a sucrose level that is typical for a bee or a fly pollinator. And it also does not seem to be able to be good at self-pollinating. Cross-pollination is assumed to be by insects. Moths is one of the ideas that there's an aplysia that can thermoregulate, which allows them to fly amid freezing temperatures that would preclude other insects from being able to fly and pollinate this. The other thing that they found when they actually did observation is in 2002, they found that fungal gnats and bees more often visited the witch hazel flowers. The fungal gnats are too small to be effective pollinators because they can't actually carry the pollen from one flower to the next. They're too small. And the bees that visit, they visit more rarely, but they can carry more pollen on their bodies. And if it's too cold, they have trouble flying. So we really don't know what pollinates the witch hazel. It could be nocturnal moths, swarms of gnats, or a bee that we have not found yet. And as a result of this information, my husband today said that he's going to set up a video to watch witch hazel flowers this coming winter, because he wants to know the answer. And he's annoyed that we don't know. So there you go. Stay tuned. Maybe next year I'll have an answer for this. And finally, seed dispersal. Paul, this gets back to your original question for me. And to finish that, I'm going to have to press on this and I'm going to have to see what happens. I might have to stop sharing for a second. So let me see what happens. Yeah, okay. Ooh, I might be able to get this to work. Let's see. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, ready? Can you hear it? Oops, hold on, sorry. Okay, we're done with that.
Coach, before we get into the
Oh,
excitement of
sorry.
winning another championship, we've already talked about what happened during the game, but from your standpoint, how do you address what went down moving forward with your...
Sorry, I'm not good enough at that. It's the first time for me to try that. And I'm gonna try to go back to my slideshow. Close this up.
So how far do those seeds travel when they're good?
They go about 30 feet.
Wow.
And half a millisecond. And
Does
here
it
are all
hurt
my
if you get-
sources.
Does it hurt if you get hit by one?
I haven't been lucky enough to be hit by one, but I'm gonna have to go stand by one next fall. And the cool part is it is the warping of the outer casing um of the of the capsule. As it dries, it warps, and that warping is what causes the tension and spring loading for that eventual spring out and release. So that is the end of my presentation, and I hope that that sheds some light on the Hamamelidaceae family for all of you.
Thank you. That was great. Before I open it up to questions, I have one. What did you find anything about how the design of the sweet gum ball helps it to disperse? Because it seems that it's, pretty hardy, and that, breaking it apart is not so easy. Unlike, it's not like an acorn where it's easily carried in the cheek of a squirrel and then buried. What is the advantage of that structure of fruit?
Well, that structure of fruit, as soon as you see it brown, it is already opened and has dispersed those seeds via wind pollination. And the seeds have 2 to 3 wings on them, and they are tiny. For the size of that fruit and the size of that seed is, I would say it's an over-engineered solution that they have.
So the gumball is just the husk of and doesn't actually contain the seeds. Well, that's interesting.
That's right.
Okay, let's look in the chat and see some of the questions that we might have. If anybody wants to just hop on and ask their question, feel free.
Yeah, I have one, and so did Noreen, that these corky twigs, what's the evolutionary function of them? And why do they come in the second year of growth?
So when I was reading up on this, it seemed as though it might be to make it harder for crawling insects to get all the way out to a bud, because they have to, wrangle their way and crawl all the way along those wings to get out there. And I also read that it was part of the herbivory prevention for deer. So a deer that goes up and tries to chew on a sweet gum branch, they're not going to like all that woody excess texture that they're going to have to chew before they actually get that nice gummy resiny bud at the very end. But the wings actually do prevent it from being able to go a lot further north, because those wings hold snow and ice and cause the branches to break and fall off the tree in more northern climates.
What other species have the corky twigs? Because there are some, aren't there?
There's a winged elm.
Winged elm, that's it.
And there's a beautiful example of the winged elm over at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond. I was over wandering around a couple weeks ago.
There's also a winged euonymus, obviously.
Yes. Thank you. That's one of the ways I could tell that species apart. Someone else plans to set up a camera on their witch hazel. My husband will be delighted to hear that.
Any other questions from the audience?
I do apologize for my pronunciation of some of those names. They really do get the best of me sometimes. And this was a great opportunity to really dive in deep on witch hazel and sweet gum. And witch hazel, every time I turned around, there was something else I needed to read about them, which was the aphids or the projectile seed dispersal, or the fact that no one knows what's pollinating them. Like, that's crazy.
Well, who knows what medicinal uses will be. We know about witch hazel, but you would think that, sweet gum would be produced for, some sort of medicinal uses, and yet you don't see it in drugstores.
Well, it sounds like they're still testing it for all those antibacterial and chemo preventative, cancer preventative stuff. So we'll see.
It may function, if it oozes out of wounds, it may have a major function in protecting the tree from invasion by fungus, which is a major cause of tree rot.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we've gone a little over our time, but I want to thank our speaker for an erudite discussion of witch hazels and sweet gums. And I think we all learned a lot. So thank you all for coming and being such a great audience.
Yeah, and I just wanted to let everyone know that it is been recorded, and we will put it up on our Tree Steward Training YouTube channel in a couple of days.
And I put the channel in the chat one more time. Thank you, Nora. I forgot to do that a second time.
All right. Good night, everybody, and thanks for
Good
joining.
night. Thank you.